Joining us now to talk more about Trump's visit to Apple, Nilay Patel. He is editor-in-chief at The Verge, and Tom Forte, he's a senior research analyst at D.A. Davidson. Guys, there's a lot of meat on the bone here. Beyond Meat, old time. Well, actually, Beyond Meat would not be on a bone. But anyway, there's a lot to chew on. We've already been chewing quite a bit on the show. So let me start with you, Nilay. Do the possible advantages for Apple in terms of operations and minimizing tariffs or currying favor with Donald Trump in this administration, does that outweigh what some would see as brand damage to certain core Apple constituencies, whether it's people in Silicon Valley, whether it's just the high negatives he has with certain segments of the population? Is the brand damage worse than what Tim Cook can extract in terms of concessions from the president?
I think we'll find out today. You know, what's really interesting is Tim Cook spends a lot of time personally with Donald Trump in a way that you don't see other tech CEOs.
Does that make him complicit in what people see as a criminal presidency to some? I mean, wouldn't that be, if he was your idol, Tim Cook, and he's your favorite business guy, and you're woke, and you're a millennial, doesn't that ruin it for you? That
I'm
he's
not
consorting
with. I'm a little bit older than that.
No, I'm not talking. I said if you were. No, I wasn't.
No, I'm with you.
I wasn't pointing.
Tim Cook is he's a values-driven CEO. He's a good CEO. He's not shy about his values, but he has a duty to his shareholders and to his company to make sure that these tariffs don't hit the iPhone. And he's spent a lot of time with Donald Trump, who's a narcissist, who cares about optics and is bad at details. So what has he done? He's taken a computer that was manufactured in Texas since 2012 when it was announced. He said, we're going to stop manufacturing in Texas. He extracted some tariff concessions from the United States government and said, we're going to manufacture this computer in Texas again at a third-party facility that is actually domiciled in Singapore. Okay, I think he won that battle. I think Donald Trump gets to look at a manufacturing facility for a computer that costs $6,000 at an entry price. They're going to make 10 of them this year. I mean, this is a super expensive computer that most people will never even see, and they're going to get tariff concessions on the iPhone, which they desperately need. That's a brilliant move by Tim Cook. Whether or not that meshes with his values, I think a lot of people see he is playing the president personally, and he's winning. I think that works.
How about you?
So I would argue that there's no publicly traded CEO who's done a better job of managing the company's relationship than Tim Cook has with Apple, with the president. And I think Apple does have the brand cachet that this would not hurt the brand.
Why not?
And if you look at the company, they're really the only one of size who has the ability to lobby both the U.S. government and the Chinese government when you think about their influence in both countries. Why not? Because I think Apple's built a brand with consumers, including millennials, for multiple decades now, and has the trust
like
of the
Nilay,
consumer.
there's a wink and a nod that he's just taking the president for a ride anyway, so let's get on board, and we're all in on the joke except for Trump. Is that
Well,
right?
I think it's more about Apple is interested in building products for consumers across the globe and doing right by consumers. Part of that is managing relationships with governments, both the U.S. government and the Chinese government, and I think they do an amazing job in China as well, which isn't easy.
Clearly, one of the things that the president has extracted from Tim Cook is today's photo op.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? That was part of the deal, as far as we can understand. And I know we're surmising here, but the question is, does that change the dynamic?
I think every time Tim Cook talks about values and then stands next to Donald Trump, there's a mismatch. But every time Tim Cook talks about values and allows the servers for iCloud in China to be run by a Chinese state company, there's a huge mismatch. And you see that he's navigating that mismatch constantly.
Right.
What Apple doesn't do is build the JEDI program for the Department of Defense. What they don't do is contract with ICE like Microsoft or Amazon do. They don't have that employee discontent around, are we building the technologies for this government or for any government to misuse against its people? They're building consumer technology, and that mismatch of values, particularly around China and what their exposure to China is very, very high. So far, they've managed to sort of avoid scrutiny of that mismatch. Days like today, that scrutiny gets a lot higher.
This doesn't change your numbers on Apple, I guess, does it?
No, it doesn't. But I'm glad you brought up JEDI, though, because if you did a compare and contrast on how Tim Cook has managed Donald Trump versus Jeff Bezos, I think losing JEDI to Microsoft is the best example of why Tim Cook has done such a good job and Jeff Bezos hasn't by comparison.
And it's just important to note, they were already building the Mac Pro in Texas, and this computer is very, very niche product. Like, I doubt the average person will ever even see a Mac Pro unless they go into an Apple store and find the corner of the store that it's in. This is a product for professionals. It's super expensive. Tim Cook gets to say, they're bringing manufacturing back to America. Right. They're going to make maybe tens of thousands of these computers.
You say Tim Cook has managed this better than Bezos, but don't you believe that fundamentally they were effectively in two fundamentally different categories of business?
In this case, the category they're both in is very large tech companies that are based in the U.S. that are both generating significant job growth for the U.S. Think about Amazon in the September quarter. They added 100,000 jobs, mostly in fulfillment, mostly in the U.S. So two very important companies for the U.S., Make America Great Again. They're both adding a lot of jobs to the U.S., but very contrasting styles.
So, Nilay, if you are an investor and you are truly woke, in your ESG endeavors, you should try not to have companies that make equipment for immigration authorities. Did you say something like that about ICE? If you're consorting with ICE, that's something that would cause woke people to avoid those companies?
I don't know that I've heard that from the investor class directly, but we certainly hear it from the employees of the companies.
Okay.
The employees of Microsoft are protesting against ICE contracts.
Against making software for immigration authorities.
Yeah, and the employees of Amazon, the employees of Google, very famously have
It's very complicated to navigate through today's world. It's very complicated for companies.
I think it's very complicated for employees who build tools that they can get deployed in ways they never intended to, or they don't want to be complicit in policies they don't support.
Ash Carter has talked about how it's a problem. The former Secretary of Defense under President Obama, he thinks it's a problem that technology companies have gone this way, and that there is an issue with trying to get them to work for the U.S. government. He's talked about it pretty extensively on the show.
You know, when I talk to sort of the executives of these big companies, I say, look, we tell our employees if you don't want to work on these products, you don't have to, but you can apply for another job at the company. But we're not just going to reassign you because you have some objection. And I think that's fair. I think the line is very difficult. So if you're Apple probably sells a lot of iPhones to the Department of Defense. Like that, I don't think that's a problem. The actual technology.
And that if these companies were, quote unquote, more patriotic, meaning if you didn't have this kind of pushback, that they would have a better relationship, not just with the government, but with the public.
I think
because they could argue that they're actually helping the country. Do you think that's an argument, or you think in this day and age of such a polarized political world, it's not really?
What's that going to get a company like Apple? They're going to sell more iPhones? Like everybody already has an iPhone. Their growth story has been expanding outside of the United States for so long. So they have transcended the borders of the country.
Do they have a problem as much with complicity for China?
I think absolutely.
They do. Okay.